Hello and welcome back, everyone. So today we'll be discussing a couple things. One of them is a question I never thought I would have to answer, and that is how to become a good gardener. And a caveat to that is I'm just going to give you some lessons learned as a good gardener to help anyone, whether it be a novice gardener to a more advanced gardener, become more successful. So to answer how to become a good gardener, like I said, that's a broad question. But to me, it's someone that's not afraid of failure, that's not afraid to experiment, is someone that's observant. Hey, these plants do better in this spot than others. These plants mix well to help themselves become more successful. And they're also someone that helps share their knowledge to other gardeners. That's not just myth. Now, moving on, some tips to help you, especially if you're just starting out. Let's say you just moved to a property or you lived there for years. My first tip for you is to get a journal, to take note of everything that goes on in your garden or in your microclimate of the property you live. My second tip is to wait a year before you decide to really plant the garden. And the reason for that, and this reverts back to the notebook, is take note of your garden and property throughout the seasons. Hey, this tree casts shade on this part of the property, so it might be a good place for shade plants, or to offer the plants that like sun a little bit of reprieve from the sun, because a lot of plants that do like sun don't like it all the time and could use a little break. Or, hey, I have water pooling up and washing up in this part of this section of the garden. And I have a good instance of it right here. When it rains heavy, water used to like to run underneath this stone wall and roughly out where I'm standing. So I planted switchgrass to help stabilize the soil. And I end up digging a pond as well, so that water could run in there and stop the erosion of the soil. So something to keep in mind. Another good thing to know is go out in the fall. For instance, at another person's garden, it was sloping down and created almost like a mini valley, and that was substantially colder than the sides of it, meaning if you were to plant there, a higher chance of frost in that area compared to other sections of the garden. These are all things to keep note of. Another tip, dig holes where you're looking to plant before you plant. Just give yourself a general idea of what you're getting into. And this nursery and all the beds within it are a testament to that. For instance, this soil here, I amended with compost, but there's a lot more sand in this bed right here, meaning has good drainage, but also doesn't hold nutrients as well as some of the other beds. I have another bed, sloping hill, doesn't hold a lot of moisture, so I have to be cognizant of that for plants that can withstand a drier condition. The delphinium bed, pretty much all loam. It's a nice balance between sand and clay. And then my vegetable bed for myself is majority clay. And gardeners have a bad view of clay, but it's actually something that can be a good thing, especially for plants that like a rich soil with moisture retention. That's your vegetables and annuals, and obviously some perennials. My next tip for you is to get a plant that's as young as possible. And the reason for that is we as gardeners, especially starting out, we go to these nurseries, whether it be my own or somebody else's, and you see these beautiful plants in bloom. Well, those plants were grown to be in bloom at that time of year. So when you get that plant and you plant it in the ground, and it's blooming without a good root system established, that's a tremendous load on that plant. And the success of the plant establishing is going to be a lot more intensive on you, the gardener, as well as the plant, because it already has that load of trying to support the flowers and wanting to set seed without a good root system established. And that plant has a better chance of succumbing than a younger plant. Now, perennials, when they're young, look like crap. They're going to be leggy, they're going to be flopping over, dying. But the younger you can get them, the better off you are, because they can establish a good root system, and they really shine in their subsequent years compared to older nursery grown stock. And when you get a plant, this is my next tip. It doesn't matter if it likes a dry condition or a wet condition. Water in heavy, at least their first few weeks of life. And the reason you want to do that is a nice good soaking makes that water go down nice and deep, causing the plant you just planted to send roots down nice and deep. That way, in the event of a drought, a drier condition, those roots can tap that moisture that's still in the ground and not die on you in the event of a drought or a period with not as much rain as it's used to having. So water their first few weeks of life. My next tip is don't buy all the plants that are in bloom when you're out shopping for plants that very day, same day or month. Because if you can, what you want is succession planting. For those of you that have heard about it with vegetables, it applies to flowers as well. Get something like a springtime plant like columbine, and then you can move into a rose for the summer, a dahlia for the fall, maybe some bulbs for the winter, just to keep that succession going in the garden, that music flowing of beautiful flowers. And you will love your garden and enjoy it throughout all the seasons instead of say just a month, June or July. In September, this garden's still going, and it'll go all the way until November. But if you plant something like a grass, it gives you something to look at in the winter as well. Some things to keep in mind. Write it down in your notebook that I mentioned earlier. Hey, this plant works good with this plant, works good in this part of the garden. Or, I just didn't like this plant. I'm not planting it next time. I'm going to dig it up. And that will remind you of what not to do or what you didn't like for next time. If you can hear them, I have some chickens in the garden rustling around. And my last tip is, like I said earlier, we'd like to go into these nurseries and just by sight, buying these plants, do a little research about what plants you would like, because it'll make it that much more of an enjoyable experience to have that plant. Hey, I don't need to be watering it all the time. Oh, it needs to be deadheaded. For instance, something like the dahlia. If you didn't know it needed deadheading, the blooms wouldn't last as long. Where if this bloom's starting to fade and you know about dahlias, you can go ahead and take the old bloom off, and it'll push up more blooms throughout the season until first frost. So educate yourself as a gardener about the plants you have. That way you can become more successful and really push your garden to its full potential and be less of a headache. And last but not least, don't just slave away in the garden. Don't always have to weed. Take a break and actually enjoy your garden. Just walk around it, enjoy the flowers, the plants, the vegetables. And you don't always have to be slaving away in your garden and always weeding and deadheading. Take some time where you're not doing that and actually enjoy your garden. That's it, everyone. Thanks for watching. And until next time, bye-bye.